welcome to Comic Book Nation, the only show that does it all for geek culture and the official podcast of comicbook.com. I am your host, Kofi Outlaw, and with me in CB Studios today is my co-host, Connor Casey.
What up?
And joining us is one of the elite MVPs of comicbook.com anime, Mr. Nick Valdez is with us today.
Oh, man. Howdy, everybody.
And we have one job for this bonus round episode, one job and one job only, and that is to break down and discuss Castlevania Nocturne in full spoilers. Netflix has released the second installment of its Castlevania anime series. This one based on the very kind of franchise-changing games Castlevania Rondo of Blood and Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which we'll get to that part in a little bit towards the end. But let's talk Rondo of Blood. So this is the big adaptation of those games, but also within the Castlevania anime kind of anthology that we've gotten from Netflix. So here's what I will say. I thought that Castlevania was, and what do we get? Was there how many?
8 episodes.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to think of the original installment with Trevor and all them.
4 seasons.
4 seasons of the original installment.
4 seasons, the first 2 were just 1 season broken up.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, we had 4 seasons of the original. So that was, we got to hang out. I couldn't remember. I knew we had spent a lot of time with those characters, but I couldn't remember how many actual seasons we did spend with them. So, yeah, we now have to jump to a whole nother set of characters that are led by Richter Belmont. And we have some other vampire killers, but of course this is centered around the Belmont family. It's Castlevania, so Richter Belmont and his whole story is the centerpiece of this. Let's just start off, because I did a whole rundown. Let's just give our impressions. I thought this is still good in terms of like video game, anime adaptations. This is still a very good series. This installment was beautiful. Beautifully drawn. I loved the animation. I loved a lot of the action sequences and how they were kind of animated. And just the look and the design, overall, the production design of this, I thought was very, very well done. I think that the story and the story of this one and the character arcs were a lot more convoluted than the first kind of Castlevania series that we got, and that is kind of saying something, but this is still was a little bit more convoluted. The character arc's a little bit more unclear, and how the series jumps around and its focus was a little confusing to me at times. Like, who am I supposed to be weighing? Like, how much importance do they have? You know, where is this person or that person going to end up? Was a little bit confusing, and some of the twists didn't hit me as much as I think they were supposed to.
Sure.
Not until the end, of course. That twist hit me at the end. I love that. But it also had more depth than I expected. I did not expect to come to Castlevania Nocturne to be going over my feelings on slavery and things like that. But
a little bit.
Here we are. And I was like, okay, at least we're not going to shy away from the fact that these are, you know, what time period this is, that we have 2 prominent black or mixed characters and like what all is going on with that. At least we're not shying away from the atrocities of the Caribbean. But yeah, I did not expect that. But so I thought it was pretty good. I just didn't like it as necessarily as much as the first Castlevania series, but I did like the aesthetic and the design of it.
I'll start with the positives, because overall I did like this show, but I have gripes. I love that it initially starts off feeling exactly like the last Castlevania series and then diverts away into, okay, we have the French Revolution setting, but we're going to talk about slavery. The vampires are going to be the aristocrats and the slave owners, because this is not a subtle show, but we're going to dive into that heavily. I love the new addition of Edward. I'm glad that we're getting away from Forge Masters and Night Creatures and getting into some other topics finally. Because I feel like the back half of the original Castlevania series got weighed down way too much by that. I love how they depict Richter as, if you're going to do anything other than Trevor or just the living stone wall that is Simon Belmont, this is the strongest guy, so you better make him look like it. I love that our boy Alucard does finally show up at the end. I think Annette's character is wonderfully done, and that's kind of where the praise does stop, though, because while you mentioned the animation, you love how it was drawn, I thought in the action scenes, it's great. When it's everybody standing around, sometimes it felt like I was looking at VTubers, because it just felt so stilted at its quieter moments, where these are such wonderfully designed and drawn characters, but something about the animation just feels like this feels unnatural. Maybe the framing's off. I don't know. The voice cast, it does a great job, but we are all over the frickin' place with the accents. And I had to keep the subtitles on because just some of the way they would do the audio editing, some guys' volume's very high, some is low. And that felt weirdly amateurish for a show like this. It's set in France, but one character is from Boston who came over. One's British, except her mother is Russian, but it's played by a German actress. She's doing no accent except whispering. And then one gal is from modern day Haiti, but it's played by a South African actress. So what? I don't know what they were thinking with some of the casting. The big complaint I have with the show is this is Castlevania. If you've ever played the games, you know it's about Dracula. It starts and it ends. It's about the big D Dracula. You're missing that. You're trying something different. And for as much buildup as this villain gets, this vampire messiah, she just can't live up to it. And her final form looks like a later season Digimon. And I was disappointed by that. Nick, how you feel?
Connor thinks it was missing the big D. So
it does miss the big D.
I liked it. So it's tough hearing all this, because I as someone who has tons of experience with Powerhouse Animation's works, it's clear that this is their marquee franchise. So there is a noticeable amount of effort put into this, more so than, say, unfortunately, you compare this to Skull Island, which just came out recently. There's night and day, like quite literally, pun intended, night and day. But here, the money and time is well spent, and I think a lot of the times in their works, which is the unfortunate part of Powerhouse Animation's work, is that their character design can be so elaborate and so fleshed out that there's so much attention paid to like how lips move and stuff like that unfortunately you can't really do a lot with the camera, and you can't really do a lot with staging in those still moments. So that's the other thing. That's a defense, first of all. But speaking to Evan Valentine's review, who he reviewed comic book. I was going to say, go check it out, comicbook.com, please. But he reviewed Castlevania Nocturne, gave it a 3.5. And ultimately, I do agree with what he says, is that there are a lot of characters in this thing. And the unfortunate part is with Castlevania, with that original series, you had 4 seasons to build up to a final climax. Like Trevor fights death in season 4. And you really can't, to start a new series, it's hard to kind of expect that same thing. But at the same time, Nocturne tries to go for that grandiose level, and it just started. So that's where the thing is. There's no core team dynamic yet, like we had in Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard in that first series. Mm-hmm. And I think ultimately we're going to get that in a part 2. Because while I liked it, I do agree with what both of you were saying at the end of the day, is that this is unfortunately a part 1. And when you end the season, it's quite literally going, okay, here we go, get ready for what's next. And it's so I do have to say this too, it's a little disappointing because there are so many cool ideas through these 8 episodes that when you get to the end, you're like, oh, this is all set up for something we're going to get explosively seen later on. And the Messiah and all that stuff, those are fine ideas, but when you get it's the trouble is we got 4 seasons to build up the other threats. And here it's we're starting from stage 1 again, and they're on the ground running. They're really trying to get everything in there, and that might be what's holding it back at the end of the day. Is there's a lot going on that they want to do, but maybe pare down some of those ideas. But I guess what I'll just cap it off by saying we'll see in part 2.
Yeah.
Or season 2.
I feel like in a way it's working with one hand tied behind its back. all of what Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night build to is the climax from Season 2 of the original Castlevania series. Alucard fighting a much more developed version of Dracula than he had been in previous games. That's what all that built up to. Now you've got to try and do you're trying to adapt those games in a way, but you're doing it completely whole cloth where we got to go off in a new direction. We're going to take a historically crazy aristocrat serial killer in Erzsébet who was in a game that was set in World War I Castlevania. We're bringing her over here, and we're going to give it our best shot, and it's just, she's nowhere near as interesting as what we got with Dracula. Which, honestly, I felt like with the way that season ended, we were still going to get him. And we don't get till episode 6 till somebody finally says his name, and when Alucard does show up, it's right after Annette says, wait, who's Dracula? It's like, oh, that was on purpose to piss people off. But, honestly, there are other games in this series where we played around with the idea of Dracula. If you get to some of the handheld stuff, which we actually got reference to at least one of those games later on in this season, but we got a reincarnated Dracula. We got Hero Dracula. If you get into the later console stuff, it's God of War Dracula. Like, we could have gone off in that direction. Instead, we're doing this with one arm tied behind her back.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what's going to hold it back too, is that in season 2, when I guess spoilers or future spoilers or whatever this could be, is that when Dracula eventually does show up, it's going to negate all the work they put into Erzsébet and all of the new antagonists, because it's like, oh well, there's Dracula.
It's like, Dracula, that's where this show matters. It's like, that's where this franchise always eventually goes.
Yeah.
I mean, the big D got to come back, right?
Oh, sorry, Kofi.
No, sorry,
just interject you real quick. It's tough too because, we had such good primary protagonists in that first series. Like, even from the jump, Trevor Belmont was just immediately interesting. And Richter here, while he does have a really good origin story, from the hook right on, when he sees spoilers for that, he sees his mother dying in front of him, and that sets him on a great path. But it's not until he gets his Gohan moment and he goes Super Saiyan episode 4 or 5 that it's like, oh, this is Richter Belmont. So it's tough because once again, this is all stuff we're going to see pay off later, but that's not the case for watching it now.
No.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I was just reading because I'm sorry, I did not know. I haven't read about Elizabeth Bathory in a long time. I have forgotten about all that, and I didn't even put it together that that's who they were representing in the show. Because I'm not up on the later Castlevania games.
No, and there's so much build for her, and it's like, is she a god? Did she drink from God's blood? It's just it's her design is ridiculous.
I was just thinking, Steven Dorff is better as the vampire god.
Yeah,
in Blade.
if we're gonna, and it's also, and it's still in some way coming back to, we need a Forge Master, we need night creatures, even though the night creatures are very clearly we're just people, we're just in crazy designs now, which I love Edward's design with the face and the hands. That thing is insane.
So cool.
But it's like, wait. Why can't it just be an army of vampires? Why does it have to be all these little characters from the games?
Yeah, I was just counting in my head too. It's like, okay, so you got Richter's storyline, you got storylines for all the major protagonists, the Abbot and as a Forge Master, the Vampire Queen and her various levels.
Who's just a random
boss.
boss.
Who seems like he's the antagonist after horribly butchering Richter's mom, but then becomes the most sexy, sympathetic character in the series, along with...
he's so cool, because he's also voiced by the dude who plays Big in Reservation Dogs. Shout out to Zahn. I unfortunately forget his last name, but he's so good at this. He's an Aztec vampire.
Yeah,
that is the coolest thing to me. Right, Zahn in terms of all this other representation we get in this show, it's like, oh, he's just also here.
Yep.
And it's like the mom gets turned into a vampire at the end. I'm like, oh no, now she'll be even more powerful, and it's very clear that vampires can just go do whatever they want. So why is this a thing?
Yeah, Mizrax in this as the Balin Skull of all this, who's like, oh, this dude's interesting. And it's like, yeah, we're not going to spend too much time with him now. But yeah, so there's a lot that's happening in this. Like, and each of it was interesting. Every time somebody new was on screen, I was like, oh, okay, I'll do a scene with this person. But like, yeah, when you start about episode 4, when Trevor's just like, oh yeah, I have magic, I was like, yeah, I forgot about all this.
Like, yeah, you're Super Saiyan fire. Good for you. But then and it's like when Juice shows up, I'm like, wait, is this, did we age up Alucard? Like, what happened here? And it's like, no, I'm just another guy from one of the handheld games. I'm like, okay, so when's Alucard showing up? And then finally, at the end of episode 8, his music finally hits. And he kills, like, one of the big bads that had been just kind of annoyingly been there throughout the entire season. And it's just like, okay, where the hell were you? Why weren't you here from, like, day 1? Or why did it take an eclipse to finally get your ass out of bed? What happened?
And like Ian and Glenn, man, like between Game of Thrones, Titans, and this, does this guy ever get to play like a happy hero, or is he just a sad, broken hero forever? Like, yeah, as Jules, as Juiced Belmont.
We ran out of names at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I hopped off after Symphony of the Night was about the last time I ever cared about a Castlevania game outside of Smash Brothers, but yeah, this is it was a lot. But like I said, I'm with Nick, though. I think we're going in circles a little bit, but Powerhouse Animation, I think they have almost that like Eon Flux thing where like eyes, lips, all that, like you said, it's so detailed that things around them, they don't like can't move because you're so locked in. But I did like that about this. Because, first of all, it's sexier. Let's just put that out there. Like, everybody's a little sex appeal. Everybody's just kind of like, you know. Every conversation is just a little bit sexier. With a little bit
this is even more vampire JoJo than JoJo.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I did that. But, like you said, in the action sequences, which are like hyper fast people going at it, they were pretty clear and like pretty well drawn. Mm-hmm. There's that last one in the church where I was like, oh my God, I thought I was going to get dizzy, but it was so everything was so pinpoint well drawn that it was really impressive. Or Dralta versus Richter, was that the fight?
Yep.
Yeah, like that was,
and then the
awesome.
screen just goes black and white when her boss shows up, and it's like, okay, now we're on to something. And she's like, I'm gonna move the moon. It's like, you didn't devour nothing.
No, but hey, you know. It's hard to be a vampire god out here these days. But I had a couple questions on our things just to keep us going in the right direction here before we get out of here. I wasn't a fan of the voice actors. Connor, you mentioned it, but I'll be out there. I wasn't a fan of this voice cast that much.
I liked
McLaren as Aurochs or whatever his name was. But he's great in everything, whether it's this or Reservation Dogs or Dr. Sleep. He's great in everything. But yeah, I didn't. James Callis is always good. Ian Glenn was good, but like, yeah, Edward Bluemall's Richter was a little bit too whispery sometimes, and just like, and also I didn't. If that guy, I was about to leave this series if he cried one more time. I was like, bro, you cry one more time, I'm out.
So Kofi, that's the fun thing, right? So. I mean, you know anime. Oh, yeah. You know My Hero Academia. This is the Deku thing.
Yeah.
This is the Deku thing. Richter is a boy who turns into a man. As we know, Richter is much older in like the games themselves. Yeah. So I feel like they purposely made him young in the series to when eventually we do get to the end of this run, he'll be like full Richter.
He's the powerhouse of that family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I stuck with it. Yeah, I know my anime. I know you got to get through some crying initially to get to the badassery. So I was in there, but it was a promising start. Not as strong as the first Castlevania, but still. Let's see. My last question to you guys is: do you want to see more installments of this, or do you want to kind of take what we've started with Netflix here and move it on to other things?
I'm good with more of it. I just kind of wish they'd reboot. And you have such an interesting concept as Dracula, the pinnacle of vampires, versus a literal family bloodline that keeps fighting him in different generations over different time periods. That's enough for a hell of a video game series, and it's enough for an anthology-style TV show. Instead, we spent way too much time in the Castlevania 3 era, to the point where we stole all the ideas from later installments, to now that we've jumped to another very recognizable part in the franchise, we're out of stuff to use, so we got to make a bunch of new ideas. And some of it's just not measuring up to what we had 20 years ago.
All right. That's how you feel. That's how you feel. What'd you guys think about that Devil May Cry trailer?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's just, Netflix is already moving on with other stuff with producing, with Adi Shankar behind it already. You have the Devil May Cry anime. You have Powerhouse Animation too. They're doing Tomb Raider, The Legend of Lara Croft, and they're also doing Masters of the Universe Revolution, which is coming soon. And Netflix alone, there's Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. There's Adi Shankar is also doing Captain Laserhawk, Blood Dragon Remix, which is that Far Cry Ubisoft universe anime.
And just randomly killing Cody Rhodes violently. What the hell, Nick?
yeah, which is super wild. Like, I was thinking, like, is Cody Rhodes like in an Ubisoft game somewhere? But no, I say all that to say I want to see a Nocturne season 2. Because I do think this deserves to at least flesh out its whole plan, and for us to see what the actual end game for this is, it does deserve that. And because Castlevania has become such a marquee franchise for Netflix and for Powerhouse, that like the Castlevania universe will expand. And like I do want to see what Connor said. Like, I really like that idea of getting multiple Universal stories, and I do think we'll eventually get that. But maybe they can lend it out to other studios. I don't know what the proper deal is. They've never really said that out loud, if Powerhouse is the only one who's going to do Castlevania stuff. But I would like to see that kind of thing. Maybe in like how Star Wars Visions does it, where they lend out the property to like other studios to see what kind of stories they could tell. I wouldn't mind something like that. But with Nocturne, I do want to see at least a part 2 to see where this is going, because we spent all this time with part 1 already.
Yeah, I mean, Castlevania Bloodlines wouldn't be bad or something like that. I mean, like as an anthology series of like shorter things about different Belmonts.
I would kill for Studio Madhouse to get their hands on this after what they did with Hellsing Ultimate. Like, give him one of the bloodiest versions of Castlevania and just go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see a Star Wars Visions for this, because like you said, the whole premise of just different eras, ultimate evil, Dracula, vampires, bloodline of family always stepping up and having to fight in different ways. Like, I would love you could play with that and do some real fun things. So I would love to see that too. But I mean, I am digging seeing some of my favorite video games get this anime treatment. I mean, we're knocking off a lot of boxes, right? It's gaming, it's anime, we're doing good here. So I'm not going to yell too much. I would invite everybody else to go out and watch Castlevania Nocturne. Let us know what you thought. We're going to be having a lot of content on comicbook.com anime, so check that out as well if you want your finer breakdown of the series and what's happening in and around it. Otherwise, anybody have any final thoughts?
Alucard's going to slice the hell out of that one chick, and then we're done.
Yeah, I want to see this floating sword.
He one-shotted the main, like, the big, like, secondary antagonist.
He really did.
I mean, that's the guy you got to make an entrance if you're going to make an entrance. And and I feel like, because did they do the floating sword? I can't remember in the first series.
Yeah, they did.
They did a lot of floating sword. Yeah, well, it's always dope. So I'll be here to, I'll be welcome to see it come back again and cut up some people in this time period. So Alucard, we thought we were going to make it out of here without him. You thought so, but no, right in the last bit, they fooled you. So this has been our review, our spoilers review of Castlevania Nocturne. Be sure to subscribe to Comic Book Nation, Comic Book all one word, -Nation on your favorite podcast platforms and our YouTube page, because we have a lot of content coming at you. So be sure to check out all of it. Nick Valdez, thank you for joining us today. If you want to find me out there, I'm at Kofi Outlaw.
You can find me at Connor KCCB.
Oh, and Valdezology on socials.
That'll do it, and we will see you out there. This is Comic Book Nation. Peace.
Later.